Hey, everybody, and welcome, welcome. If you are joining us live, it is great to have you here. If you are joining us via the replay, welcome and thank you for stopping by. My name is Rob Phelan, also known as the FI Educator Online. And I'm joined today by Stevyn Guinnip, who's going to be talking to us about the relationship between your physical health and your financial health. Stevyn has this really interesting intersection in her career, which is actually really hard to find. You can find a lot of people who talk to you about physical health, being healthy, and all the ways to do that. No shortage of people who will talk to you about how to do better with your money, but the number of people who will talk about both and be knowledgeable about both in the way that Stevyn is actually quite rare to find. So I'm really excited that Stevyn's joining us today. Stevyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's this is not something again that we normally see in a personal finance class. We don't usually bring up things like physical health and how that relates to our financial health, mostly because as a teacher, I don't feel very qualified to talk about it. I'm probably on a rare side as well. I'm dual certified math, phys ed, and self-taught personal finance. So I probably could talk some bit about this, but not as much as you. So I'm excited that you're here.
Oh, great. It'll be a great conversation.
I think so. I saw a video that you did. I forget who the host was, but apparently you gave a survey at some point and you asked people, would you rather have perfect health in old age or unlimited wealth? And I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about the survey, why you gave it, and the kind of responses that you got, because I think that's a really cool way to kick this off.
Yeah, I did that survey last year and just was really curious what people would think. And because the circles that I run in are all financial people, they're people who value money, security, and the responses were, they could choose X or Y. They could choose one of those answers of health or money. But the comments below were so interesting. And a lot of people said beyond a certain base level of money, then they would choose health every time. Because if you don't have that base level of income, the stress is so significant that it affects your health and you would deteriorate quickly that way. And so it was really interesting just to see that for the most part, though, there wasn't an amount of unlimited money that people wanted. They wanted their health, and which is consistent with, I think it was annuity.org that had a study that came out last year. And they asked baby boomers and said, if you guys could go back and do it again, what would you choose? And they, gave them a list of a bunch of different things like love, money, career, accolades, different things like that. And hands down, they would go back and create more health in their lives in as baby boomers in retirement. And after that came love, and number three was money. And I think that's just really interesting. It's like we get to see a little bit of a preview in the future of what is actually going to be important to us. And there's actually tons more data about that as well. I don't know if you want me to keep sharing, but those are some of the ones that are important that I've noticed lately.
Okay, so this sounds like another one of those scenarios of what I wish I'd done when I was younger, and then
Yeah.
the timeless problem that adults see when we're talking to younger people, and it doesn't have to be kids, just someone younger than you, and being like, please just listen to the wisdom of what I'm saying. Like, I didn't realize this until it was too late. Um, don't make the same mistakes I did, or let's try and learn from that. Did you find that the answers you got varied based on age, that younger people were maybe more concerned with wealth and older people more concerned with health, or what did you see?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I found because I did another survey right after that too. And I asked because I got such an overwhelming yes to health. I wanted to understand that more. But I saw the theme in both of these surveys that I did, which is the younger that people are, the more they want money and they just take their health for granted. The older people are, they start to realize that things break down and they don't like it. And they realize that money can't buy that back again. And so health becomes more important. And when I asked them, what is it about health that you want? And of course, this went out to everybody. They said the younger people said they wanted to be healthy to look good. And the older people said they wanted to be healthy to feel good. And I thought that the distinctions were really very interesting. So whether you think it's important for you young or old, it has the reason for the importance even changes throughout life stages. And there are four major life stages, each one about 22 years, 8,000 days. And as you move through those life stages, your thoughts change, your needs change, your environment change, and your body changes. And so it's really interesting that throughout all those stages, health is a constant theme, money is a constant theme, but they kind of jockey for position, but they're still really important. And that's why I love that analogy of laying a railroad track. Like the money is one rail, your health is the other rail, and that gets you to your destination for purpose, relationships, all of those kind of soft things that you can't really measure as well.
Love that. And then the fact that the reason why it's important varies based on age as well. And I think that's probably true with wealth too. Like if you ask a younger person, like, why do you want a lot of money? It could be for all the stuff you could buy, the things you could do. And then maybe for an older person, it's like the freedom that it affords, the time that you get back to pursue the things that make you really happy. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like what we want and what is truly driving us changes depending on our life situation. So how much wealth we have or how much time we have left in one sense.
Right.
So if you are watching the replay, make sure that you check out the reflection document that we have available that goes with this talk. We're going to go through these different questions as well as some other things that pop up that just seem like great things to talk about. If you have questions that you want Stevyn or I to answer and you're watching live, make sure your teacher puts it in the chat. If you're watching the replay, feel free to drop it in the comment section of the video and we will try and get in there and answer those for you. But I wanted to ask you about why you got into this, because like I said, it's a very unique field that you are in. And I read a little bit of your backstory. I know that you had a dad who was really involved in finances. You got to spend a lot of time around his clients and the work that he did. What is it that you were seeing that made you say like, okay, hold on now, this is more than just about money. It's also got to be about health too.
Yeah, well, my first experience with that was when we were on a top producers trip. So all these top advisors, financial people were in Scotland. And I was a teenager at the time. And I remember sitting on the bus after this dinner event next to the main person, like the one who had the career title, the money, the all the accolades. And I was just chit-chatting. I mean, I was just a kid, I didn't know anything, right? And this person was telling me, strangely, but still telling me how their health, they just gotten some bad information about their health, how they had just come to this trip by themselves, how they didn't even want to be on this trip, how they had broken relationships with their kids, their spouse, and basically he was miserable. And I was like, even as a kid, I was like, is this success? I don't know if this is what I would define as success. Like, is this something I want to shoot for? Probably not. But everyone in that trip was aiming for that position, right? They wanted to be at that level, but I don't think they realized the cost that came with it. And that isn't success in my mind. So then fast forward a few years, I'm in college. Between college, like in the summers, I'm working in my dad's front office. And that's when I started meeting his clients. I was like, oh my gosh, they're actually employing these concepts and they're, saving for this and have the perfect balance ratio, risk tolerance, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then they would retire and get sick or die. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what is this, like the ultimate bait and switch? That's what I felt. Put all your money here, be safe, be successful. Oh, your health failed. Sorry, oops. Like that regret from people is so deep and so hard for them to swallow, that they thought they did everything right and then they didn't get the outcome that they had actually planned for. So when my dad said, hey, I think you'd be good in this industry, do you want to start working on taking over this book of business? I mean, it was a big book of business, making a lot of money. I couldn't swallow it. I just couldn't do it. I was like, there's something missing here in this whole equation of life and retirement success. And that's what I thought at the time was exercise. I thought, like, these people, if they were just exercising, they would have a healthy body and they'd be able to, have railroad tracks that meet at the end together with enough life and enough money to be successful. Because everyone's worried about running out of money, right? But nobody really worries about running out of health. And those are both really, really important. So I became an exercise physiologist for 20 years and I almost died while I was living in Australia, launching a kettlebell program. And after that, I realized exercise is not the answer either. It's applying all of the financial principles of little good decisions throughout a long period of time, and understanding that you are building a 401k for your health in lots of different ways. Stress and sedentariness and how you eat and all of these different things. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, these line up so well. I'm at the perfect intersection here for having a conversation about health being an asset, and it needs to be part of a retirement plan.
I think when we talk about health, it's not just, like you said, your physical health. It's not your fitness. It's not how much you run or walk or anything like that. There is so many different facets of wellness. And we've had a couple of conversations about mental health and money. So that was a really cool video if you want to go back and look at that one. We've talked about relationships and money. So your relationship health is a big factor in terms of your overall happiness and fulfillment in life. But yeah, it's about more than money. It's about more than physical health. But why do we typically at a younger age take our health for granted? Like, why are we not from a young age? Like, we're very focused on building money. Like a lot of us are like, yeah, I want money. I want all these things. I'm going to choose a career that will pay well. I'm going to work myself really hard in the beginning to get to that end point where I will have wealth. And we approach it like there is an end point.
Right.
Like, suddenly you're wealthy and now we can start living the rest of our lives. Like, why do we do that?
It's a myth. I mean, I've interviewed 500 professionals in this industry for a book I'm writing on this topic. And there's a myth that exists out there that if you work really hard and hustle, that you will be successful and you'll make enough money and then you'll get to live the life that you want. And that just doesn't happen. There's this status quo where we come into the world, and I'm just generally speaking, we come into the world with a really high level of health. Most of our systems are working, right? But we come into the world with no money. So we only know health. And then we're like, okay, we need to strive, we need to raise that money and meet our health, right? So then we're successful. The problem is that aging happens and all kinds of other taxes on our health happen, and we don't know about them. We don't protect it. And so our health is kind of dissolved away or erodes over time. And so you have this big like cross in the night where your wealth goes up and your health drops. And when you've got the most money, you've got the least amount of health typically. And the thing that surprises me, Rob, all the time is that everyone I've ever spoken to is always surprised when a health event happens. What? I had a heart attack. I had a stroke. I had some diagnosis that didn't me. Well, how does this happen? And it's just so it's not funny, but it's remarkable that we just human nature maybe assume that things will always continue as they've been, and that's just not the case. I just, in our family, we just talked to a friend of the family who was just going along and living life and all of a sudden ended up with a torn aorta. And you're like, okay, that's life threatening. And it's a surprise. Why did this happen? And these things happen because there's usually a domino effect, and it's almost like a bucket that fills up. And when it reaches the top, it overflows into some sort of a problem, right? And we don't realize that we're filling our bucket too full too fast over time. And it's I don't know what that is. We're always hopeful. We assume that things are going to be the same all the time, and we strive, but we strive for success and we don't strive to maintain. One more thing I'll say about this is that if you right now and me in 10 years had the exact same abilities that we've got right now, maybe to get up and down off the floor, the same weight, the same pain-free living, or whatever it might be, we would be super, super excited. That would be success. So I think people don't realize that if they're not doing something for their health, they're actually sliding backwards. Like they have to be actually doing, it's almost like your money with inflation, right? Like the same amount of money in the future is going to be worth less. So you have to have a plan to kind of adjust for that. And it's the same for your health as well.
And we're talking to a high school student audience, and for most of you watching, with some very notable exceptions, I'm sure. Like you have not seen any deterioration of your health yet. You are not as aware potentially as some others might be of how this can go badly. The events that we're talking about are called black swan events. It comes from the idea that for a long period of time in history, we only believed there were such things as white swans. And that if you ever saw a black swan, it was like this catastrophic thing that would happen, like doesn't happen. And then eventually black swans were discovered, I think in Australia. But a black swan event is something that we just did not see coming. We didn't plan for it. We didn't predict it. COVID is an example of this, where nobody out there was saying, oh, we should have an emergency fund for when a worldwide epidemic happens. No one is planning to have a heart attack, stroke, things like that. And if you are, you're looked at very strangely. You're looked at like, why are you such a pessimist? Why are you so afraid of all these different things happening? They probably won't happen. The odds are not, and you're like, are not stacked in that way. And if you lived your life constantly in fear of these things, it would probably be a very, I don't know, would it be a low quality of life? Potentially, it might be.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think us humans are programmed to be optimists in terms of like, we think things will continue the way they're going until they don't. So
Right.
trying to plan for that is hard. Same thing with retirement. It's hard to plan to be old when you're young. Like you don't plan for that moment where like, oh, my body won't let me work anymore. I can't just
Yeah.
go make more money.
Yeah, I think that when you're young too, I mean, if we look at the arteries of young people, atherosclerosis, which is a hard word to say, is a hardening of the arteries inside of your body, the veins, the arteries. And if they harden, then they end up getting, that's a precursor to heart disease and different things. And we know that that starts in kids around age 9, right? So we're all at some level approaching disease, and how can we slow that down and maintain? I call it health span. So within your life, you've got lifespan, and then inside of that, you've got something called health span. And if we look at the statistics over the last 100 years, we've increased lifespan from 59 years to 79 years or something like that, which is fantastic, right? But we have not increased health span. And so what does that mean? We've got this piece of our lives that's called sick span that costs a fortune to fund that sick span. And you don't feel good about it either. And so if you can employ some of these things to start looking at your health as you do your finances now, then you will become wealthy, as I call it. You'll extend that sick span, sorry, you'll extend the health span and reduce the sick span and save yourself a ton of heartache and money as well, paying for that stuff.
And for all you watching, like if you are going to start talking to someone else about money and they've never thought about it before, usually the first thing you have to do is paint the picture for them why this is important. And I think for a lot of you, we might be doing this as well. And we don't want to come across as these like two adults who are dictating to you how life's going to be. Like that's every teacher's nightmare to do that. And then, personal finance experts, same thing. Like you don't want to feel like you're being dictated to. So we want to try and help paint for you a picture as to why this is important to consider. So from a financial side, how is that going to impact your health? And then from a health perspective, how will that impact your finances? So I want to tackle those in two different questions, if that's okay. So question 3 on your reflection paper is going to be about how your finances impact your health. So if we're in tough financial times, what health impacts might we see from that, particularly if it's financial times that last a long time, like we're in a low income career, we're not changing it. We've got high levels of debt. What impact do we see that having on people's health typically?
Yeah, the most pressing one, because there are a lot, is stress. And stress is something that is becoming like, yeah, whatever. Like we're all under stress. That's just part of life. It's like, oh, I've got, tests coming up or this thing going on in my life that's never going to end. I just have to learn how to deal with it. Well, maybe you do, but there are things that you can do to stop it. And the reason that that's important is because if you have something called low level chronic stress, it creates an inflamed system. Your body inside physiologically starts to change. And it's mostly from a release of these chemicals in your body. Cortisol is one of them, and your adrenal glands secrete cortisol, and they kind of constantly secrete it because you're under stress from a financial perspective. And that creates low-level inflammation and chronic stress, which deteriorates your cells over time and invites illness to come into your life. And that's something that can be created from income issues, overspending, debt that you carry, any of those things that affect your finances kind of weigh on you. And your body doesn't really understand. It knows it's under stress and attack. It doesn't really understand like what's going on. And so what happens is you start to go into fight or flight mode. There's two nervous systems that you've got: fight or flight or rest and digest. And most of us, especially in the United States, live in fight or flight all the time. And that is a pathway to chronic diseases. So finding ways to increase your income and reframe in your mind what's going on in your life is going to help to lower your stress. And then that is going to let your body turn on its rest and digest, and then your body will begin to heal itself. So I always tell people, if your finances are not in order, it's a health issue. If your desk and your life and your house are not in order, it's a health issue. Because even like a cluttered desk or a cluttered bedroom will cause a low-level chronic stress as well, strangely enough. But getting those things in order at kind of the base foundational level is a move in the right direction for better health.
Yeah, I actually just finished a book called The Myth of Normal. And it was really interesting to talk about how the US has created this sense of normal, that high levels of stress are normal. You're like, you said it yourself, we're all stressed. That is the way that we've created our society, that we are trying to be as productive as possible. Rest is for the weak. Emotions are for the weak. Like all of these myths that we've got that cause for stress to build in our bodies. And like you said, the normal mentality is, well, you just got to tolerate it. You got to put up with it. You got to find ways to manage that. And you guys have to challenge that. Stevyn's already kind of said this, that it's not about this endpoint. It's about the journey all the way along, and that we have to care and grow these things all the way. So your wealth has to grow. Your health has to be maintained or grown at the same time. Your relationships, your mental health, those all have to be intentionally cared for throughout this journey if you want to be able to enjoy all of the perks that wealth can bring at the other side.
Yeah, and one caveat to that, if you don't mind, I'll just add a little bit to that, is if people say, oh, I need to take care of my health, especially if you're on the younger side, they go exercise and they try to clean up their diet. And sometimes cleaning up their diet means like, oh, I'm not going to have any sugar, I'm going to cut out all sodas, or I'm going to be extreme in some way. Just know that that creates a little stress in your system. Just by doing that, exercise is a stress, eliminating certain foods is a stress. So if you haven't addressed your sleep and how you are dealing with that stuff, you're actually going to be making it harder for your body to get healthy. So it's not always about adding more and doing more. Sometimes it's about removing something and really understanding what feeds you versus what stresses your system.
I think a lot of us experienced that during COVID, where we were all forced to stop, slow down. All of the things that were demanding our time, our attention, sort of had to go on pause because you couldn't do anything. And many of us for the first time experienced what it is like to just stop, to pause, to feel all the things, to do things for fun, to wake up when you want to wake up. And that's something that I think was very eye-opening for a lot of people in terms of like, oh, this is what the rest mode feels like versus that stressed out state all the time. And so be aware of that like it can happen, it can exist, but you do have to start creating it for yourself. You have to be very intentional about it because our world demands your attention. Everything around us demands your attention and has the ability to cause stress in your system.
Well, and how do you know? How do you know if you're stressed? Because like you said, it's a normal. It's the normal that we all feel. If anybody has a smartwatch, or if you take your heartbeat on your wrist or your neck, test your heart rate. And if you're sitting still and your heart rate is high, your body is experiencing stress. Do something to bring the heart rate down, like breathe from your belly or close your mouth and breathe from your nose and slow your breathing down and watch your heart rate drop. You just tapped into that rest and digest system. You just healed your body a little bit. So it's hard to measure stress. And that just, I wanted to give everybody, like, how do you know? Watch your heart rate. It'll tell you.
I remember reading that like humans in the US just breathe too much. We breathe too fast.
Yes.
How many breaths are we supposed to take a minute? Is it like 5? Is that it? 5 or
No,
6?
we're most people take somewhere between 12 and 16 breaths a minute. The lower, the better. But if you can slow your breathing down to 6 beats a minute, you will stop the cortisol production in your adrenals and you will go into rest and digest. So there's normal living. And then when you go to sleep, typically it slows down. So that's what you're trying to duplicate is in real life, slow that down. 6 breaths a minute, 8 breaths a minute. What I love is to mimic a yawn. So breathe in for four counts and then hold your breath for 7 counts and then breathe out for 8 counts. That mimics a yawn and it snaps you right into your parasympathetic nervous system. You do that 4 times, it takes you about a minute-ish, something like that. And that's going to bring you back down into a good place of breathing.
So while all of you are probably focusing on your breathing right now and probably check your heart rates as well, let's flip it over to the other side. And if we now have low physical health, our physical health has suffered either through chronic disease, injury, whatever it is. If we have low physical health, what impact can we expect to see on our finances? Because we know this is like a very symbiotic relationship. Like they are impacting each other in a cyclical way, but bad health or low health is going to impact our finances. How?
Yeah. Well, there's a few ways. I actually just did a presentation on this in January, but one of them is in how you allocate your dollars, how you allocate your dollars. So are you going to be, if you're well, you're going to be spending your dollars on hobbies and fun things. If you are not well, you're going to be spending your dollars on doctor's visits, medications, and that sort of thing. And a perfect example of this is my two fathers. Has anybody read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? I mean, I'm sure they have. They've heard of it, right? I've got sick dad, healthy dad, or well dad. And they both were the same age. They both had enough money and they both were retired and had the same time. But where their money went, because one was sick and one was well, was vastly different. One of them was spending $6,000 a month for care, for medical care. And the other one was spending, I don't know, $200 a month to go play golf every day and pickleball with the buddies, right? Like there's a vast difference. And so one was actually spending less and having more fun. The other was spending an exorbitant amount of money and not enjoying life at all, going to dialysis and doing all of these things that nobody wants to do, right? And what's the difference there? It's the only difference is health. It's not anything else. So how you're going to allocate that is going to be a big difference. Also, if you're going to get insurances, some point in the future, you will want to purchase insurance, probably. And the healthier you are, the better you're going to have as far as a premium goes for life insurance. So, when you maybe get married or have kids, you want to have life insurance to protect those people. The cost of that is very different for a well person versus a sick person. And if you wait until you have a diagnosis and then try to fix it, it stays on your record still. So just like, don't go there. Start out healthy as part of your financial plan. Get the best rates for all the insurances that you apply for. Those are some of the main ways.
And just on that topic of insurance, it's a weird one. It's like the less money you have, the more expensive your insurance probably should be, because the purpose of insurance is to take away the risk of financial ruin from you. So if you think of it as, okay, I don't have a lot of money, so if something really bad happens, I'm going to need this financial help. Versus if you have a lot of money, you might be able to pay less for insurance because you're like, okay, I just need to cover like the truly catastrophic events, like the 100,000 plus medical bills. Everything else I can cover out of my emergency fund. And therefore you end up paying less for your insurance overall. So just keep that in mind as you get started. Like, you want to protect your finances, you probably will look for better insurance coverage during the time. And same thing for auto insurance. If you've only got one car, you don't have an emergency fund to cover it, you better make sure that thing is covered so that if you get in an accident, you can get something new. Versus if you got a car replacement fund sitting over here, basic level coverage will be fine. Because you're like, I can always go into my emergency fund to buy a new car if I need to. So that's definitely a perk of having money versus not.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And then
Um,
our
oh,
ability
sorry,
to,
go ahead.
our ability to earn income, how is that impacted by our physical health as well? Because you talked about the ability to have leisure, which is huge, and that also feeds into our physical health as well, which means that less health problems in the future. But our ability to earn income surely is going to be impacted as well by physical health impairments.
Yeah, and I'll give you two stories. Two stories. One is of a Marine who started after he got out of the Marines, very healthy, right? Marines can do stuff. They're very resilient people. And he started his first job and he poured everything into that first job and neglected his health for the first 3 years of that job. And what happened is he gained 40 pounds in 3 years, and he started having high blood pressure and anxiety attacks and had to take time off of work to take care of his health, which impacted his ability to progress and move where he wanted with his career. So if you have to press pause or you can't show up at your work as well, your income, your earning potential is tapped down and you can't grow as quickly as you want. That's one example of getting started. But let's fast forward to another gentleman I spoke to who's 62 years old. He loves his work. He wants to continue working until he's 68. And that's what his financial plan is based on for retirement. But he can't because he says by 2 o'clock, he runs out of energy. He has brain fog. He doesn't sleep well. He's under a lot of stress and he feels like he can't even make it through the day anymore. And so now he has to look for someone that can take over his business and look at retiring early because he feels like he doesn't have the health to continue to go. And that's a big deal. That impacts your finances in a major way because your body is not able to operate. And I will say, when you're young, I've been there too. When you're young, you can push the limits. You can just get up and grind it out. You can stay up all night. You can just work a little harder. But there's a point in life when that doesn't work anymore. It will catch up to you at some point. And that's the point. You just want to prepare for that now. And when it does catch up with you, all else stops. Your earning potential is gone. In fact, there's a stat out there from a company called AgeWave and Edward Jones that says the number one reason for an early, unplanned retirement, you might be thinking, ooh, I got to retire early. Yay, I get to play. No, this is unplanned and they didn't want to retire, is because of a health crisis. That impacts your finances in a major way.
So you guys sitting in the high school classroom right now, there's a couple of things to think about from this. The career choice that maybe you're considering, is that something that is going to be physically demanding on your body? Are you working in an industry that is going to take a toll on your body? And you need to know, like, this career will not last. You think about most professional athletes, like they don't continue that career after age 40 in most cases or earlier because their bodies can't hold up to it anymore. Like you think of pro football players, especially, like they got a very small window to make their money and then they have to make it last. It's not as extreme for most careers, but you still want to consider, like, is my career something that I can do that's mostly focused on my mind? Is it a physical labor job that if my body fails, I cannot do this job anymore? And am I planning appropriately for that? I know plenty of students, there's a couple sitting in the room with me right now who tell me, like, I love to work. I want to work. That's all I want to do. I want to make lots of money. And we think about front loading this, that we put in a lot of effort right now, we will reap that reward later. If you don't have the financial management that goes with that, where you're saying, I'm doing all this work, budgeting this money I have, building money-making machines for the future, so maybe passive income or investing in my retirement or things like that, eventually your body won't let you do that anymore. Like you can't live paycheck to paycheck that way and expect it to last forever. Your body will tell you no at some point, and it will say, I can't do it anymore. And then you're in trouble, like you said. Now the income stream is gone. We don't have the support in place to allow us to retire early. And we see a lot of people end up in poverty for this very reason. You end up in a low paying job that your body will let you do, but it's not really enough to survive on, or at least maintain the quality of life you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we've painted the picture about why this can be a very negative thing. The positives, of course, are the opposite, that if you have an abundance of wealth and income, it can go in that same equation. Like, what are the health benefits to having more money?
Wow, the health benefits of having more money, that's a two-sided coin, okay? Because I have a client right now who has a net worth of $50 million. Okay. He has tons of money, has worked for 3 decades in an industry and been extremely successful, but he never thought about his health once during that whole time. And now he's 60 and trying to figure out what to do to play catch up. He's basically dug himself into a health debt or almost a bankruptcy that money can't get him out of. And because of all the money, he has cigars at night. He drinks a couple alcoholic drinks at night, fancy bourbons or whatever, and lives the high life, eats the filet mignon and whatever. So wealth can inhibit your health if you let it. But the flip side to that is if he had seen it as an asset, something that's just like his business that he needs to protect and grow and mitigate the risk on, then he would have started investing in his health when he was younger and take some of that money and put it toward whatever. Maybe you don't like to cook and you want to take some of that money and you can get HelloFresh delivered to your house every week and you don't have to cook. So money can buy some of those opportunities. It can't buy health, but it can buy things that can create health. Personal trainers, wellness coaches, someone that can come in and teach you yoga classes to slow your stress down and teach you how to breathe. So money allocated to yourself is money well spent. And so if you have more of it, you can actually create more resources for yourself to not end up where this gentleman did. So it's money can create unhealth or it can be a great tool to support it, but it all depends on what your priority is and that you see it as the level of importance that it actually is.
Yeah, and this needs to happen all the way along. Like you might say, well, if I buy the gym membership now at 20 years old, well, that's $30 to $50 that I could have been putting to my retirement that would slow down my wealth building journey. And you have to find that balance of, yes, you will slow down your wealth building journey by allocating some of your funds not into saving, investing, and putting them into things like protecting your wealth. Can you find that money from somewhere else that maybe isn't super important to you? That would be the first step in your budget. But slowing down your wealth building journey is not a bad thing to do. Are you familiar with Grant Sabatier?
I'm not.
So Grant Sabatier, for those of you who are not familiar, he's the owner of Millennial Money. It's a great website to check out. He's got a book under the same title. His story is he went from like $1 in his bank account to over $1 million in 5 years. And he did it by grinding for 5 years, like living in New York City, I think like in basically a closet and doing nothing but working multiple jobs, barely sleeping and investing everything. And he also had the fortune of investing a lot of his money in Amazon as it was growing. But, story 0 to $1 million in 5 years. And talking to him now, one of the biggest pieces of advice he has for people is slow down. It's not, there's no real race you have to run here. He wishes he had done it slower because like your examples, he gained a lot of weight. He burned a lot of relationships along the way, didn't get married, have kids, any of those things that were now really important to him. But he's got the money, he's older, and it's harder to do these things now that he wished he had done when he was younger. So like you said, treat your body like an asset. Like it is an asset and something that you do have to potentially put some money into. Now, there's lots of free ways to maintain your body too. It doesn't have to be money related, but money does buy you time.
Yeah, everybody needs support in some way. If you love to run and you go out and walk your dog or you climb mountains or whatever, you don't need to pay for that support. But maybe you don't do food very well. Maybe you need to pay for support wherever the gap is. That's where you might need to pay for support. And there's a gentleman. His name is Terrence McMahon, and he has a TED Talk that's called "Broken to Beautiful." And I would highly recommend that you guys watch this because it is a financial guy who made the big bucks and he ran his health into the ground until he almost died, had to have a liver transplant. And now I interviewed him for my podcast. Now, when I was talking to him on the phone, I could see he's at the ocean behind him. and the sun was starting to go down in the window behind him. And he goes, "It's almost sunset, so I'm going to have to wrap this up because I turn off all screens now and I relax in the evenings." And I just was so blown away by that, that he's now orchestrating the things that keep his health going and prioritizes that over all else. But it's because he had to, because he nearly died. Anyway, it's a very motivating TED Talk to watch if you have time.
I will link that in the description on this video if I can find it. Okay,
Yeah.
so Stephen, now let's talk about the strategies that we're going to use to create better health and better wealth moving forward. So again, talking to high school students, we maybe don't have that big stream of income yet that we will have in the future, but what would be some tips and strategies you think that we could all put into place right now that would improve our health and our wealth moving forward? So not at the sacrifice of one.
Sure. I love to think of a continuum. Health is a continuum. And if you have at one end, you have one which is near death, severe disease, and you have at the other end is perfect health, athlete, Olympic level. We're somewhere in the middle of those, right? And if I assess most people, and I would encourage you to assess yourself, where would you put yourself on that scale? And then how could you improve? Most people want to be at an 8. They want to be like, not like it's their whole lives. They have to be super disciplined, but like they feel good. They've got good habits. They're pain free, like stay at a good 8, right? I call it great health, GR8, great health. And to go along with that, there's a framework of 8s. So try to stop eating by 8 o'clock if you can, and start eating by 8 o'clock in the morning. Stick to your 8 to 8s. It's a really easy way to let your body process food and then repair and digest food. The other thing is get your 8 hours of sleep. And if you can get them before midnight, as many hours before midnight as possible, you're going to get deeper, more reparative sleep and manage your stress much better. So 8 hours of sleep, eat from 8 to 8, and get 8,000 steps every day. 8,000 steps. Go for a little walk in the morning, take a break in the middle of your day, go for a walk after lunch, like eat for 15 minutes and then go for a little walk for 15 minutes. Even if it's just like pacing around the room or saying hi, going to get a drink, it doesn't matter. It only has to be at 1.2 miles per hour, like a simple stroll, and that's going to support your health long term. So those are just a few, just to give you a little framework. Go for great health and stick to some of those habits. And you're going to see, and I probably would add one more, an 80, drink 80 ounces of water a day. That's a really great, great middle ground for most people is about 80 ounces of water. For me, it's my big water thing. I do 2 before 2 and I do 2 after 2, and that keeps me hydrated throughout the day. So just a few ideas to, if you can implement just those things right now, you will have a long life with a lot of health. Because with my clients, I have to work with them when they're in their 50s, 40s, and 50s, and they're not doing any of that stuff. They're in the financial world and they're sitting behind a desk dealing with stock markets going all over the place and volatile. The stress is out the roof and people are calling them saying, "Why'd you lose my money?" Whatever. And they're getting like 2,000 steps every day, almost nothing. They're going to bed super late because they're doing a second work day after dinner. They're going home and working some more, and they're going to bed like at midnight, 1, 2, sometimes even 3 in the morning. So they're not getting sleep. They're dehydrated all the time. They're drinking too much alcohol. So all of these things create bad health. If you can just put those few simple steps in now, you've just made a huge deposit into your future health.
And we just made a big list there, and please don't get overwhelmed. And I know a lot of you high school students will look at this and be like, well, school starts at 7 or 7:30 or 8. So that's going to be hard. I finish at this time. I got my part-time job or my sport. Like I don't even have an 8-hour window between start to finish. You're trying to do the best you can in these areas. And if you can even start adding some of them in, like the water one, you probably are in full control of. Can you bring a bottle of water with you and drink it in all your classes? I would imagine no one's restricting your access to water. The movement stuff, like I work in a school where students are here from 7:30 to 2:15, and there's probably 20 minutes of movement during the day where you have time between classes. The rest of the time you're spent in your seats. Can you negotiate with a teacher in terms of like, can we try and do things like a wellness walk for 5 minutes where we get our work done, and we carve out time in our day to go for a walk or something like that. I can almost guarantee that if you are approaching this with the idea of it's a negotiation, we're going to do our part and not just demand time off of work, that you might be able to find some flexibility there. When you do have breaks between classes, can you make sure that you are moving during that time, not just standing still or sitting more? If lunchtime is restrictive, like you don't have a recess, which is true for a lot of high schools across the US, unfortunately, can you eat and then maybe find a way to build movement within your building or within the space that you have? And then as soon as school is over, guys, like before you launch into your part-time job or into homework, get outside, go walk, go do something that is just a little bit of movement, and build up these things. Look at your calendar, look at your schedule for the day. Where can I build this time in? The big, I guess, scapegoat in a lot of cases is looking at your screen time. Like, how much time are you spending on your phones or in front of TVs or devices? Can you carve some of that time out and turn that into movement instead? Eating better. It's a hard one to do. Again, you're dependent on families and what they are providing you in some cases. But if you're in a personal finance class, hopefully you've talked about food budgets and meal planning. Can you get involved in your family's meal planning and maybe start creating more healthier options, or start getting involved in the cooking and teach yourself that really valuable skill at the same time? Larry asked a question about, well, what if like my body is telling me like I'm really hungry really early in the morning, like 7:30, 6 in the morning, and if I don't eat, my stomach hurts? Would you say like listen to your body, or would you say try and train it to
Oh,
stick
yeah.
to 8 to 8?
Yeah. And I guess when I say 8 to 8, that's just like pick a time when your body is not eating and pick a time when your body is eating. Maybe it's 7 to 10 for you. Like maybe it's 7 to 7. I don't know, but just try not to be eating right before bed and first thing when you get up and all the time and having a snack in the middle of the night, because your body then it needs downtime. It needs to be able to have repair. And if it's always digesting food, then it doesn't get to repair. So choose that time that works for you. Maybe it's 6 to 6. I usually cut the day in half at 12 hours because that's just a good way to have a fasting and a feeding time. But work with whatever works for you, because we don't want to stress your system out. It has to feel good, has to be easy, and you have to be interested in doing it. If you're not, take that thing and just set it aside and just pick something else that feels right for you. All those things I listed, it's almost like trying on a pair of pants at the store. Like you try on the jeans, you're like, these don't fit quite right. I'm not put these down. Try on something else. You don't have to do it all. Even just a little bit will be a big step in the right direction. So, but everything I teach from my perspective, it's a hierarchy of wealth, and it's a pyramid, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy or order of operations for math problems. Do the first things first. The bottom level is know where you are and what you want to do. Be aware that you see this as something that you want to focus on. The next level is take care of your stress. If your stress is out the door, don't go try to like get a gazillion steps in or try to reorganize your food for your whole life. Like you're going to add more stress. Just start working on your stress next. The next level up, level 3, is look at your food. If you guys want to download the Daily Dozen free app on your phone, it's a really fun checklist to see if you're getting enough good food in your diet. You get to become kind of a detective and say, oh my gosh, I got another one. And you try to check as many of those boxes as possible. It's all based on this book, this huge, actually 2 huge fat books on all this research called How Not to Die and How Not to Diet by Dr. Greger. But the app kind of brings it all into this really fun way to see if you're getting enough great food in your diet. Maybe you want to just start there. Daily Dozen. So just pick the thing that feels right to you at the time. Once you make that a habit, then look around and say, oh, let's pull this water one in, or let's pull this, go to bed maybe a half an hour earlier. Don't feel like you have to do all or nothing. A little bit goes a long way.
Yes, exactly that. One thing at a time, and then small changes. So if you're only currently sleeping 5 hours a night, let's try and get you 5.5 tonight. Next week, 6, and you try and space out a little bit more. There are some things
Right.
you might have to put in motion, like can I renegotiate with my part-time job the hours I'm working, or do I need to look at changing jobs? Or you're coming to the end of spring semester, summer's coming up. What do you want your summer to look like? Let's plan that intentionally instead of letting it happen to us, so that we can try and focus on these things that are important to us. I do want to go back to one thing you said about, quality of sleep, and we didn't really mention any tips on that. How do we improve the quality of the sleep that we are getting? So besides just getting more of
So,
it, some of us struggle to fall asleep. Some of us feel like we don't get great sleep while we're in there. It's very light. We wake up a lot. Do you have any tips for getting better sleep?
well, we know that sleep pays the bills. Okay. Like if you want to pay the light bill and keep everything operational and make sure your roof doesn't have leaks of your body, sleep is the ticket. So we want to really invest in sleep. But you can't just say, sleep deeper, sleep better, sleep longer. Like you carve out the time. That's one thing. But then to actually improve your sleep, it starts in the morning. So, first thing when you get up, if you can get your eyes on sunlight, it sticks a stake in the ground of your circadian rhythm and says, we know what time of day it is, and we're going to be ready to sleep deep tonight. And that sets you up for deeper sleep when you do go to sleep. So, first thing is get your eyes on sunlight. In the morning, the second thing is to move your body in any way, any way. Do some stretching, maybe go for a walk, while you're waiting for your breakfast to warm up or something, do a few push-ups on the kitchen countertop. Like anything will work because it signals your body that this is the on time and that the off time will then be better later when it's time to go to bed. And then the final thing is, before you go to bed, set a wind down time where you're going to shut the screens off. You're going to get the blue light out. Your body has to produce melatonin to go into deep sleep. And when blue light is going into your eyes, melatonin won't be created. Now, that doesn't mean go take a melatonin supplement. That doesn't help long term because then your body stops producing it altogether. So you have to figure out, how do you turn the lights off or put the blue blocker lights on or something that's going to, again, signal your body, oh, it's time to produce melatonin, and then we'll go into a nice, deep, healthy, reparative sleep. So those are a few ideas.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Particularly the phone and screens one. Like, don't sleep with your phone next to your bed. Don't fall asleep watching TV or watching something. Like, try and train yourself to put your phone away at least 30 minutes to an hour before you go to sleep, so that you're letting your body have a chance to wind down and think about going to sleep, and it will help improve the quality of it.
Absolutely.
I have one question for you that hasn't been answered already that I really want to ask. This one comes from Josie. How much income or wealth do you need to be able to afford good health care in the US? So like, is there a number, like in terms of income, that if you're below this number, it could be the poverty line, it could be higher than that. Like it's very difficult to have great physical health because you just don't have the income to support it.
Wow. If you're talking about preventative care, that's one thing. Or if you're talking about sick care, that's a totally different thing. So healthcare to me means sick care because you're paying for doctors and insurances and that kind of thing. With the Affordable Care Act that happened, gosh, what was that, 2011 or something?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have perfect health to get health coverage anymore. And so that's really not as much of an issue. But when it comes to taking care of your health outside of healthcare, then that is when you need to get the help that you need. And that means that if you have a dog, go for it, walk the dog. Like, it's free. You don't have to have a certain amount of money to take care of your health, right? It's not, I don't know that there's an actual level that's needed, because it's really just eating fiber, making sure that you don't spike your blood sugars, managing your stress, how you think, and moving your body every day. Like, those things are all free. Anybody at any level can do it, except if you can't manage stress because your finances don't allow you to pay your light bill or something. And I've heard lots of different numbers of what that is, but and correct me, Rob, if you've seen something else, but I've seen $70,000 a year is where people completely relax and they can start thinking about other stuff because they feel safe at that income level. What have you heard, Rob?
I've heard that is where the correlation between income and happiness plateaus. So
Yeah.
if we're below $70,000 a year, and that's obviously depends on the part of the country you live in, different parts are more expensive than others, but as your income increases, your happiness typically follows along with it. Once you hit 70,000, it's not really about the income anymore. It's about what you're doing with what you have. So we will see people with multi-millions who are still unhappy, who are still unhealthy, who are depressed, all these things. But below 70,000, it's harder. It's a more challenging life at that point. You're going to have stresses on your finances that will push your body and will push those stress levels up. We talk about eating healthy. It sometimes does cost a little bit more to eat healthier, or maybe to afford housing in a location where things like this are available. So access to some of these things is sometimes harder in inner city areas versus out in the more suburb areas or deep in the rural parts, maybe harder again. So there are definitely correlations, I think, between having a little bit more money and income, but it's also about how you use what you have. And there is that story in The Richest Man in Babylon, like that you will sort of ever read this book. It's an amazing short book that you all should read. But there's a story where the mentor comes out and he says, well, can't you find somebody else who's doing it with less money than you have and who's happier, wealthier, healthier than you are? It's not about the amount of money above a certain amount, at least. Like, so a base level amount is not about the money, it's about what you do with it.
And I think that number is, for people who want a typical American house, American life, that kind of thing with 2 cars and the dog and all of that. But if you don't have to live big like that. I've lived in Portugal. I've lived in Australia. I've lived in the city. I've lived in the country. I've actually lived in an RV before. You can live very small if you want to, and you can live on far less than what the average American does if you don't have to have 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms and a huge yard and all of this stuff. Like we can be happy on much less. And most people in the world are, and we tend to have bigger lifestyles than most of the world do. And so my advice would be, do you need that? And I'll just give you a quick story as an example. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, talking to a group of financial professionals at the Financial Professional Association, FPA. And one of the men there tripled his business during COVID. He was bringing home over $1 million a year. He was producing much more, had a big team, and he was successful, plenty of money, but he just kept getting a bigger house. He was in the process of buying a $3 million house when I was talking to him. Did he ever eat dinner at home with his family? Never. He had a gazillion bedrooms and bathrooms and a huge yard that he never spent time at, but he still needed to get the bigger, better thing, whatever the next thing was. So that's what I think people have to be aware of, is like, know when enough is enough for you, and you don't have to keep growing and getting bigger.
That is huge. What is enough? And have you ever thought about it and tried to define it? Hopefully in your personal finance class you have, but if you haven't, and that's a lifelong journey that you reassess and you come back to every year, what is enough? But American culture, our advertising, our social media will very much push a consumer lifestyle where it's about the stuff you have, the lifestyle you live. And you need to just check yourself and be like, is that what I want? Or is that what society tells me I want? And if it is, great, make that your plan and go for it. If it's not, don't let society dictate to you that you need to have those things, and make sure you're doing what's right for you. What are the things that make you happy and bring you joy, and you're putting your money and your time into those things? Okay, Stevyn, final question for you. What is your number one piece of advice for teens when it comes to building wealth?
For building wealth?
Yes, and you can talk about it from a health perspective, a money perspective. I mean, you can take that whatever direction you want. What's the number one piece of advice you give young people for having a better
read the book Profit First. Have you ever read it? Do you know it?
I have not.
Profit First. Whether it's your life, your business, your job, you own a business, it's going to teach you a theory. And the theory of the book is the most important part. And it is pay yourself first in every way, because whatever time or space you give something, it will fill it. And I'll just give you an example. You have 16 hours of awake day that you're awake in your day. If you wait to take care of your health when there's time or what's left, it won't happen. If you wait to pay yourself after all the bills have been paid before you save something or put something to retirement, there won't be any money left. So take your profit first, and that's going to make sure that you then have to work with whatever's left. And it flips the whole concept of financial, I don't know, income versus expenses, and then whatever's left is what you get. It takes it the opposite. You take out what you need for you. Maybe it's 1% or 10%, doesn't matter. Take something off the top, and then the expenses are what you have left, that you have to be creative and make hard decisions about how you're going to live within that. But that will make you profitable, saving, building wealth from day one. Even if you have a part-time job right now, take it off the top, and whatever's left is what you actually have to spend. Same thing with your health. Pay yourself first. Do the things that you need to do for you, and then you will actually be a better resource for everything else that you do in your life when you take care of yourself first. That's my advice.
I love. Sorry, I had a bell going in the background. I love that a lot. And I like that you put it in wealth, health terms. So like you think about your day and the amount of time you have, carve out that first hour. That's for you. The first bit of your paycheck, that's for you. That's awesome. Okay. Where can people find you? Because I know you mentioned you have a podcast. I would love the name of your podcast for anyone who's interested in hearing more from you. And then also social media channels, websites. Where can we find you?
Sure. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great resource for content. I deliver as much content as possible there. I am the girl named Stevyn on LinkedIn. So connect with me there, follow along, hit the little bell, and every time I put something out, you'll get to see what I put out there. I am mostly in the financial world, so if that's interesting to you, you'll get to see all the things I comment on what's going on in the financial world. I'm on Instagram at Grow Wellthy. I don't do a whole lot there, but like my travels to Portugal or different things, I put a lot of that stuff there. I did want to say, if you guys are on Instagram, follow Glucose Goddess. Glucose Goddess, look her up. She does the most fantastic little graphs that show how your blood sugar responds to the food that you eat. And it's really, really well done. You'll learn a ton from her. And then my podcast, that is launching when the book launches. So I've recorded a ton of podcast episodes, but they haven't launched yet. So you can't find it anywhere yet.
Well, what will the name of the podcast be? Can you tell us?
Grow Wellthy.
Grow Wellthy.
Yeah, it'll be Grow. Mm-hmm.
And you can see the spelling of this behind Stevyn's head on the fake screen behind you, but the Wellthy part is Wellthy. So when you're looking for Instagram or the podcast, when it goes live, we'll be able to find that. Do you have a rough launch date just in case someone's watching the replay and like, oh, it's live?
Yeah, end of summer is my goal. So like end of July.
Awesome. Well, Stevyn, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we've all learned a lot about our physical health, our financial health. If you liked what you've watched, make sure you check out the YouTube channel for other videos and interviews like this. And we hope to see you back again soon. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.